I am the man in the box buried in my...
What the hell is wrong with you?
You know who I'm talking about, right?
No.
What?
You're feeling all right?
I'm feeling great, man.
Apparently so. What's in your cup? Give me some of that.
Well, go ahead if you want.
What is it?
It might kill you.
Oh, wow, that is good.
I'm a bottle of it up there. But anyways, you don't know who that was?
No.
Man in the Box? You don't know who sang Man in the Box?
Not off the top of my head, no.
All right. All right.
I don't know who sings a lot of good stuff. I'm sorry.
There was a girl who went to a magical place after eating mushrooms.
Okay.
Who was that?
Alice in Wonderland.
And let's say that she had been captured and confined. What would they put her in?
Probably a jail. I'm going to go with Alice in Chains here. So you're going with this.
We need to talk about some chains today.
I mean, I'm kind of uncomfortable with where this is going. Talking about a girl in captivity in chains. Okay, well, let's roll with this.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
Dude, episode 74. Episode 74. And, you know, we always play in numbers. Our listeners know that. We play in numbers.
This is true.
74. 1974, man.
Isn't that close to when you were born?
The introduction in the four-wheel drive world of the NP203.
Ooh.
And the Quadra-Track transfer case. The two first mass-produced chain-driven transfer cases. Now, chain-driven...
So that, like, we need to hear some thunder and lightning go off as you say that.
That's what I'm saying, though. So, you know, we've talked before on the show... Way back in the day, Jesse Livingood built some chain-driven transfer cases for his Model T conversions. There was other manufacturers that built some low-production stuff, but the first two mass-produced chain-driven transfer cases came out in 1974. And, of course, changed the industry because I don't think there's anything gear-driven anymore, is there?
I don't think so.
Well, maybe the Mahindra Rockster. Is that because it is because that's a Spicer 18 version.
Yeah.
And that might be the only one out there, and maybe our listeners can correct us. I mean, I'd be interested to know, is there anything else that's gear driven?
I would be too. Besides industrial stuff.
And not aftermarket.
Yeah.
So not like we're talking
none of the Atlases.
Yeah, not like
I think those are all gear driven, aren't they?
That's all gear driven. So you know, you got your
factory production gear-driven transfer cases.
In your, you know, light-duty pickup trucks, Jeeps, 4x4, stuff like that. Like, yeah, we know that the big, heavy industrial stuff, you can still get that, the military stuff.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
So, well, that's the question then. That's the question, buddy. So, okay, why, if military, industrial, and heavy-duty off-roading is all still gear-driven transfer cases, why is all the OEM chain-driven?
Comfort.
What do you
noise.
think? You think it's noise?
Yeah, I mean, gear-driven, you're out. It's just different. With a heavy-duty application, you don't have to sacrifice comfort and sound quality for functionality.
True. Do you think there's a production cost difference?
I would imagine so.
Because, you know, like in 74 with the MP203, you had the...
You're also talking weight, too, keep in mind.
Well, yeah, the MP203 was still cast iron.
Yeah.
But it had chain on the inside. But then the Quadra-Track was aluminum. So that was the first aluminum chain-driven mass-produced transfer case. Yeah, maybe you're right. I'm not 100% sure there. But...
imagine a lot of it would be the weight, more so than anything. Is the whole fuel mileage thing with that. You can make lighter parts. You know, it's going to be cheaper to produce that. You can take 2 gears and a chain rather than 4 gears, and all the machining costs involved with machining those 4 gears. Excuse me. I'm kind of losing track of my point here.
No, I get what you're saying, but okay, so our listeners here, most of our listeners to Wheeling, you're already 4x4 enthusiasts. But even if you're a 4x4 enthusiast, you may not know or fully understand, and for those that you do, we apologize, but we're going to do a little explanatory thing here. Transfer cases are divided into 2 types for the most part. You have gear-driven transfer cases and chain-driven transfer cases. Yeah. And the difference is that all of your early transfer cases and today what they consider heavy-duty transfer cases were all gear-on-gear. So you had inside the transfer case, which of course is the part of the vehicle that sends power to your rear axle and your front axle. It's what makes a 4x4. It's the device bolted to the back of a transmission or sometimes divorced from the back of a transmission that allows you to send power to both the front and rear axle. Well, your transfer case, inside of the transfer case, the actual guts of the transfer case, up until 1974, they were all, for the most part, except for some very low production stuff, were gear on gear. So you had cogs like on the inside of a clock or a,
or transmission.
No, not a manual transmission or
a real transmission.
Yeah, cute. Or a differential. It was all gear on gear stuff. Well, then in 1974, the NP, which is new process, came out with the 203 transfer case. And then Borg Warner came out with, and I don't remember the numbers, but they had a couple different series, but there was the Quadra-Trac and the Jeeps. And so these were chain driven. Instead, they had gears on both sides, but there was a chain in the middle of it. And like John said, there was not necessarily fewer moving parts, but there was less heavy parts. This was all in the middle of gas crisis. So,
yeah.
And there was also the advantage of they were able to go a little bit deeper of a low range. Although you can still get that out of a gear-to-gear transfer case with the right setups, but the deeper you go with a gear-to-gear in, say, like a Dana 300 or an Atlas, like with some aftermarket gears, you end up getting more gear noise, as you mentioned before.
Yeah.
You get a louder transfer case. Chain-driven transfer cases, like even in the Jeep Rubicon now, which is a 4-to-1 low range, you don't get any gear noise.
Yeah.
Because it's all chain-driven and it's bathed in oil and it's
maybe I'm wrong on this, but I know at least 231s, 241s are shift on the fly in and out of 4-wheel drive with them. You can do it at speed. I don't think you can do that with the gear ones, can you?
It's kind of a hit and miss thing. It depends on the cut of the gears, whether they're straight cut, bevel cut, this and that.
Yeah.
Most people with an MP205, which is a gear-to-gear transfer case, and there was a heavy-duty one that was made up until the mid-90s in certain applications, you can, like under 20, 30 miles an hour, you can kind of like gently shift it into 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
But there's no 50, 60 miles an hour throwing it in 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Most chain-driven transfer cases, you can do that. Like my Excursion has I think it's an MP271, if I'm correct in it.
Oh.
And maybe a Borg Warner. I'm pretty sure it's an MP. But, I can be going on the freeway in icy, snowy conditions, and if I have my
pull it in gear.
and I can throw it in gear.
Yeah.
Boom. And all of a sudden I'm in gear. So there's some advantages there to the changeover, which has a planetary in it too. The gear on gear, no planetary. The planetary is kind of this gear reduction thing that's inside of them. And so it was 74 was a revolutionary year in the transfer case industry.
For sure.
No,
Man, your phone's making all kinds of racket, man.
Whatever. Just let it make those noises. So going back though, in 74, we got the 203 and then we got the Quadra-Trac. Now, the Quadra-Trac went through several generations, and I think do they still call the Grand Cherokee transfer case the Quadra-Trac?
Currently, I have no idea.
They use that name for years.
I haven't looked into any newer, excuse me, jeez. I haven't looked into any newer drivetrain or gear train options on any of these current model vehicles.
Well, like I said,
I pretty much stop around the TJs and that stuff.
But I'm saying
era.
they used that name for years, the Quadra-Track name.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're still calling it that now.
Where the MP203 was short-lived, it was, 10 years or so. But the 203 was unique that it used their low-range box was separate from the transfer case. So they had the gear-to-gear low-range box was on the front of the transfer case. And then they had the chain drive, four-wheel drive unit on the back of it. What's cool about that is you could pull the low-range box off the front of the 203.
I was just going to bring that up because isn't that how they make the doublers?
The 203, 205
Yeah.
doubler, which was made famous by our previous guest, Stephen Watson, Off-Road Design.
Oh, really?
He's the one. Now, like he said, he admitted on episode 73, last episode of the podcast, he said he was not the one to come up with the idea,
Yeah.
but he was the first one to mass produce it. And, you take a 203
I
range
do
box.
recall that now, yeah.
That's called the range box, which allows you to put it in low range.
Yeah.
You take that, and he makes a plate to mount it to the front of a gear-to-gear 205. You get rid of the low-range setup, and you make this doubler transfer case. So now, because the 205 has...
Ultra low range.
Yeah, it's got a 4-to-1. It's a really neat setup. You're able to have that. You're able to have this... now you got a low-range box in front of a transfer case that already has a low-range. Neat setup. So
Yeah,
you end up
sure.
getting the essentially a 3-speed transfer case because you have your 4 high, and then you're with your MP205, you get your standard 4 low, which is like a 2-to-1, and then if you engage the MP203 range box on the front of it, you end up with like a 4-to-1. So it's a pretty neat setup.
Ooh. Nice.
Yeah, so
It's got to add some length to the drivetrain, though.
well, ironically, the NP203 already was about the same size as a 205 with a range box in the front of it.
Okay.
So if you're building an old 70s truck that had a 203 in it to start with, and you do a 203, 205 doubler, I think you only add like an inch to the drivetrain length.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really it's really compact.
Yeah.
Now, if you're taking something such as Jeep or something like that, and you're retrofitting a 203, 205, because a 205 never came in a Jeep,
Yeah.
and 203 never came in a Jeep. You're putting this doubler setup in there. Now you're looking at something that's maybe 3 or 4 inches longer than your stock transfer
Yeah,
case.
that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Well, I mean, CJ7, TJ, YJ, of course, an LJ or a JK, you're going to
Yeah.
have the drivetrain length in it.
Yeah, and the bigger ones you would, yeah.
In a CJ5 or a flat fender, you're probably not going to have the drivetrain length to do it. But
But at that rate, you might as well just build up or Dana 300.
yeah, well, the problem therein lies, though, you're still not a selectable. You don't have a standard low range and a deep low range.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the beauty of the doublers.
Yeah.
But this is not the doubler episode. We said
No,
we were
no.
going to bring Steven back on talking about doublers in the
Yeah.
futures. We're kind of talking about here now the chain driven versus the gear driven. Now, you've had rigs with both, or you have rigs with both.
I have a rig with a gear driven, but I've never actually driven it.
Your Jeepster.
Yeah.
Yeah, your Jeepster. And then your TJ
Excuse me.
and
TJ and the XJ are both chain drivens.
both 231s, correct? Both of
Yeah,
them.
and the one I built up, I just put a 6-pinion planetary in it, heavy
of a
duty
Chevy?
chain sprocket set. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. I thought I did something else to that.
Chevy
that was
chain?
It was actually out of a Dodge 231.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, heavy duty chain sprocket set or gears and chain out of that. And then the 6-pinion planetary from a Chevy. And then a slip yoke eliminator is what I did on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So listeners here, if you've got, okay, I guess pedaling back here for a second. Once again, I'm speaking to you as if you're a newbie, so forgive me, and there's nothing wrong with being a newbie if you are. If you don't know what kind of transfer case you have, and of course you can Google it if you have a stockish vehicle. If you don't have something that's a hodgepodge of parts from something else.
Yeah.
But if you've got a transfer case in there, majority of transfer cases built from the mid-70s to now typically have a tag on the back of them. And they'll straight up tell you what they are.
Yeah.
So there might be grease on there and things like that. So if you get under your rig and you kind of wipe it off and you take a look and you go, okay, and there'll be a little tag on there. And it doesn't matter if it's a Borg Warner or if it's a new process or whoever.
I think they
made
renamed it NVG over the years too. At some point. Or that's their current name, isn't it?
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, New Venture Gear.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. And you go in there and you go, okay, and there's a tag, and the tag's going to tell you what you have. Now, vast majority of Jeeps since the mid-90s have run, until very recently, have run 231 transfer cases. Dodge trucks ran like 241s. Chevy heavy-duty trucks ran 241s. Chevy S-Series ran 231s, except for the very early ones, which ran like a 208 or so. It was a weird number, but
There are some funky numbers of those out
But-
there.
you know, John's talking about the 231 here. Now, the 231 is for the chain-driven transfer case world, for all purposes, is kind of the hammer of the chain-driven transfer case. And what I mean is, you know, there's no name brand. It's the 231 was used in Dodges, Chevys, Fords. It may have been used in some foreign applications. I'm not sure on that, but the 231, you can build the heck out of using stock parts.
Yeah.
But you kind of got to mix and match. Like John was saying,
Little bit, yeah.
You use a Chevy Planetary, you use a Dodge chain, you use, you know, but the parts all interchange for the most part.
Which is nice because it's just one set of spare parts then too if you have multiples.
Exactly. So there's some cool ways to do some stuff with the 231. The same goes with the 241. And actually,
Yeah.
some of the 241 parts fit in the 231 because the 231 and 241 are the same architecture.
Yeah, planetary gears, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, and one of the things, like, if you want to adapt it behind different transmissions, you can use the input from a variety of 231s and 241s.
That's the craziest thing is the different kind of inputs you can get with that. Holy crap.
As far as I know, and I don't know how many in total, but I know that there was 23 spline, 28,
21.
31, 21,
Yeah.
32, 34, 37. Those are all available in those series of transfer cases.
There's
So,
some long ones and short ones.
yep.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of different things you can do with it.
Oh, yeah. The cool thing, there's a lot of aftermarket support, too. I think it's Terraflex makes a 4-to-1 front half of the case.
Yes.
And then now you have your, what is it, 272-to-1? I believe is what the normal ratio is. Put
Yeah,
that case,
about
now you
that.
have a 4-to-1.
Yeah.
And then you can get a, what is it, too high? No. Too low. It's a shift fork you can get, gives you an extra step. Instead of like your 2 high, 4 high, 4 low, 2-wheel drive and neutral, it adds, I think it's a 2 low.
It's probably a too
saying that
low
right.
rear.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way currently, and if there's a listener out there that can correct me on this, I don't think there's a way currently, and that's one of the disadvantages of a chain-driven transfer case, is to get a front-wheel drive only application.
Yeah.
So when you're rock crawling and you want to do a twin stick setup and you want to be able to just, like when I was on UA, there was a couple of guys, especially when we were the very last day when we were over there on Bikini Trail, just off of, in South Dakota, just off of the Mount Rushmore. Some of the trails were so tight that really the rigs that prevailed and really did the best were the ones that could take and engage front axle only
Yeah.
and dig around the corner and kind of just drag the rear axle, like a trailer axle, just kind of drag it around the corner and then re-engage the rear axle. Now, the rig I was in with Chad, we were running a Rubicon Rock Track 241, I think is what it's called,
Sounds right, yeah.
in the JK. Even though it originally wasn't a Rubicon, we had a Rubicon one swapped in.
Those things are hard
and-
to find, and they're not cheap.
No, I know he paid a pretty penny for it, but we were not able to just engage the front axle.
Yeah.
And I don't know of anybody that's able to do that with a chain-driven transfer case. Now, when you got a 300 or a 205, one of the old,
You can do that.
you can engage just the front. They got a twin stick setup because they have the separate shifter rails.
Yeah.
Boom, you can do that. So that's this is not a pro and con thing. We're just kind of talking about, so like I said, 1974, that's when these things were introduced, and they kind of, within a few years, took over the
Yeah.
4x4 market.
Yeah.
But you know, so that's kind of one of the disadvantages there. But there's many advantages to a chain-driven transfer case, even though in the hardcore wheeling world, they're, I want to say they're not used because they're in all sorts of rigs, but they're not preferred.
No.
You know, people prefer the Atlas as an aftermarket, or they prefer putting in a 203, 205 doubler, or even just running a 205 in like big mud trucks or whatever. The chain-driven or the gear-driven stuff is much more popular. Yeah,
it's heavy duty.
That's the thing. It's the gear-driven stuff is more durable.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you take a chain that slips, you're screwed.
I'll never forget, you know, I had one of my first quote-unquote off-road rigs, and it was really not modified. Was an 8, and I think I've talked about it on the show before. I had an 88 S15 GMC Jimmy, which was the last truck, and it was a 2-door, 5-speed stick, 207. That's what they were called. I had a 207 transfer case behind that thing, which was the predecessor to the 231. And you know, it was and then I saw all the fenders put some bald as 33s on it, and I took it to Drummond Island. I took it to other places in Silver Lake, and I had some fun with it. It was a great little rig. You know, it was a Michigan rig. You know, you could, you know, with 33s, and I may have had a limited slip in the rear. I don't remember, but you know, it did okay for Michigan. Not lifted. I think it cranked the torsion bars. That was about it. Well, you know, the thing had like 280 or 290,000 miles on it.
Nice.
It was pretty high for, you know, a little S10, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, not unheard of, but pretty high. But as you'd shift this thing, every gear you would shift in, you'd hear clunk, clunk, clunk. You know, and I got underneath it, and I'm checking all the U-joints, and they're all tight, and the rear axle's tight. I had a mechanic buddy who was big into Chevys, and I took it over to him, and I said, man, I says, this thing sounds like it's got a bad U-joint, but the U-joints are fine. I said, I can't figure this thing out. So he takes it for a test drive around, and he goes, yeah, man, you got a lot of transfer case slop. And I says, transfer case slop?
Chain slap.
And he goes, that chain has got to be so stretched out in that thing. And I said, okay. I says, what do you do? He says, well, you got to rebuild it, or you got to buy a transfer case for it. And I never did. Mm-hmm. I was going to, but on the S trucks, the transfer case, I believe, had a different input spline count, and they were kind of hard to find with the T5 5-speed in them. They were rare-ish. And so I kept driving it. It never did break on me, and you know, but it
was a lot of noise.
It was noticeable every shift, you know, and it wasn't like loud bone rattling, but it was tunk, tunk, tunk. It sounded like a U-joint in there, you know. It was just, so that's a disadvantage of the chains. But
yeah, I mean, when they get older, yeah, for sure.
Higher mileage.
That's a better phrase, yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of which, you know, my excursion, which we've called Project Excursion in the past, I didn't tell you this, but so the other night I'm working in the barn, you know, which was going to be no wheeling studio and all that. I'm out there, and I pull the trailer next to the barn, and I've got 6,000 pounds of concrete on it, Quikrete bags.
Okay.
Pull next to it, and, you know, right where my concrete mixer is, and all of a sudden, rear wheels are spinning. I said, okay, no big deal. Get out, lock the hubs, to, you know, throw in 4-wheel drive. Nothing. It will not good. It will not engage into 4-wheel drive. Ugh. Getting some weird clunking sounds in the front, popping sounds. There's no broken U-joints in the axle.
Yeah.
I don't know what the heck's going on with it, but yeah.
Do you have that vacuum system in the front?
No, it's been got. That was gotten rid of. It's got worn hubs on it now.
Gotcha.
So the vacuum system's gone. I don't know what's going on in there.
I'm not sure then.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look at it this weekend or whatever. But I hate to admit this to you, but Project Excursion got pulled up by a Land Rover.
Oof.
Oh.
Oof.
I know. I kind of whispered that Land Rover. Yeah.
We can edit that out of this public statement.
Yeah, I'm just saying, man. I'm sitting there and I'm looking over in the drive.
Project Excursion got pulled out by a big lifted Jeep.
Yeah, there you go. A Chevy with a Duramax, you know, or a Cummins, you know.
A large farm-all.
I looked over at, I walked in the house and I said to Stephanie, I said, you need to go grab your Land Rover and you need to hook it up. And she's like, so she pulls it over there. And this thing's got no toe hooks. This thing's supposed to be like an African exploration vehicle. It has no toe hooks. I put like a D-ring underneath the thing. Or not a D-ring, a suicide clip. You know what those are,
Yeah.
Put that baby on some little loop. I told her, I said, go slow. Go slow. She got it out, but it did pull it. I mean, she got 300 horsepower, which is like double the Excursion, but...
So she sat there with her heated seats on.
Yeah, exactly.
The radio,
exactly.
idling out with this huge Excursion behind her.
She didn't idle out. She had to jerk it a couple of times, but
right.
She got her out of there. And so then, get this. So I unhooked the trailer from the Excursion. I just abandoned it there right now. I get all the concrete off of it. But I needed the trailer today.
Yeah.
And so last night, I'm out there like 10 o'clock. And I had played with the Excursion on some dry pavement. And I was messing with some stuff, and I was looking underneath it. And I engaged four-wheel drive. And it's like, all right, it seems like it's engaged now. I could feel it pulling on the pavement and all that. I'm like, I think I'm good. I'm like, it must have been something. Like, one of the things I read online, now mind you, I'm very mechanically inclined. I rebuild this stuff all the time. But one of the things I read online was that the Excursion electronic transfer case, which, by the way, I hate electronic transfer cases.
Agreed.
That's something else. All, as far as I know, electronic transfer cases are chain driven. The gear-to-gear ones are all shifter. So
I never would have even thought of that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
So I've got this, whatever the Excursion's got in it, transfer case. Reach up on the dashboard, pull the very manly knob, and turn this thing, from 2 high to 4 high. And, okay, it seems like it's engaged. I'm like, I think I'm good. I go back. I go to try to hook up the trailer. No, Excursion gets stuck again. I'm like, oh my God. So
time to upgrade.
Yeah, I get the boy with his Z71, with his little Project Z71, and he gets me pulled out. And then I said, all right, we're going to hook up the Z71 to the trailer. So I hook up the Z71 to the trailer, and his four-wheel drive is working.
Yeah.
Thank God. And he makes it about 4 feet. And he'd never driven with a trailer before anyways. Doesn't matter, but he makes it about 4 feet, and it just sinks. The soil south of the barn right now is like oil, man. I mean, it's like grease. I had the excavator when I was doing the foundation there, and it was literally sliding on the tracks. I would go to grab something, and it would slide on the ground.
Wow.
It's that greasy. It's like clay, weird, like it's so slippery. And so the Z71 buried up to the hubs in the rear. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, what are we going to...
That explains why the driveway looks the way it does.
Yeah. You saw the mud, did you?
Yeah, a little bit.
So now, the Land Rover LR3 last night, Stephanie took up to get new tires. Great.
What'd you get?
I don't even want to admit it.
Uh-oh.
Well, apparently the BFGs were back ordered. She was going to get some all-terrains.
Yeah.
So she ended up going with like Michelin something or other, and they were supposed to be similar to the all-terrains. And I went out and just looked at them. Car tires. They looked like car tires.
I'm so sorry.
She did go up like 2 sizes though.
Yeah, there's that.
It does look better, and they have like, I don't know, 70,000 mile tread life warranty, and she does barely off-road that thing.
Michelins are decent tires.
The Michelin are good tires. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But so I go out there and I'm like, all right, man. I'm like, so my option right now is we got the Silverado buried and I got 2-wheel drive Excursion. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, my piece of junk farm trailer that I have, for some reason, has a hitch on the back of it. Now, mind you, I would never double trailer that thing down the road. So I went and hooked up a tow strap into the hitch and hooked up to the Excursion, got the Excursion up by the driveway where I had solid ground and pulled in backwards. And I just told him, I said, just steer. And he's like, well, I have to back up a trailer. I'm like, you're fine, man. And so we got the whole thing pulled out. I only got like 4 hours of sleep last night because after that whole
I get every night.
debacle, Yeah, I need my 9 and my massage, my beauty sleep.
Ain't no amount of extra sleep gonna make you look any better.
Yeah, well, Anyway, so, I currently, and I guess I'll have to update our listeners, I don't know if the problem with the transfer case, or I don't know if the problem in the Excursion is the changer of a transfer case, or if it's something with the hubs in the front of the lockout hubs.
I'm leaning towards the transfer case. The hubs are mechanical.
Yeah,
it
I
either
know.
works or it doesn't.
Well, the popping and the pulling, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe one of the hubs is like stripped or something.
I mean, that's possible.
They're
too.
Warren premium hubs, so I don't
It's
know,
possible,
man.
I guess. Yeah.
Possible, but I mean, I don't beat that. I mean, I beat it up at work every day, but I don't off-road it like
Yeah.
hardcore every day. But
Huh.
so yeah, man. I don't know. It might be the transfer case, but I'll tell you what,
I wonder if there are any options to swap that for a mechanically shifted one.
they are. So,
Oh, good.
if you get a mechanically shifted transfer case out of a Super Duty
Mm-hmm.
truck,
Nice.
you can
Just swap it.
There's apparently,
Nice.
I've read some things online where you can get rid of the servo motor on the top and you could like modify a shifter to it. But I already know that I've got a leaking seal between the trans and transfer case. If I pull that transfer case out, I am not putting an electric transfer.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I would just pop one in and, a floor shifted one and
Yeah.
maybe a manual automatic. I don't know.
I mean, priorities, options. Good, reliable vehicle. Keep the automatic. Sorry, I almost threw up there saying that.
Yeah. So the thing is, I've got the 4R100 automatic. Knock on wood, I got 360,000 miles on that thing, and
it's
unlike
due for replacement.
unlike our friend Mr. Bob, who goes through a transmission in his Dodge every 30,000 miles.
What?
Yeah, he's only got transmission number 17 on that the Cummins now.
I
You ever seen him drive? He
No,
literally
haven't.
drives his driveway. He friggin' just hammers it and then drops it in gear and and
poor truck.
yeah.
I mean,
He basically carries a spare one in his toolbox.
I believe it.
Yeah. So I'm on the stock transmission on the old 4R100 is treating me good. The only reason I like the automatic is traffic coming back from work, driving every day.
I'll give
for
it that.
9 hours.
I had a few times driving Pegasus in some traffic on 94, especially when you get on a hill. Ooh, that sucks. That really
Well, your new
sucks.
Cybertruck, whenever it comes in, is going to be.
I forgot about
fully
that,
automatic.
yeah.
You forgot about the fact that you put a deposit on a Cybertruck.
Truck I'm not going to see for 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it like at all. Well, that reignites a spark.
Well, I'm just saying.
I think it's going to be sweet, man. I'm excited.
But anyways, so folks, we were not, the intention of episode 74 was not really here to tell you all the technical information between a chain driven or a transfer case or gear driven transfer case or a chain driven. But, to let you know, there are some pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
You get the better noise quality with the chain. You get the
Lack of noise.
Or lack of noise. You get a durability with the gear driven. And
Weight differences between them.
yeah, they're typically
probably the
lighter
biggest
with the
thing.
chain driven. The 300's pretty light, still hefty though.
Yeah, it's a cast iron case.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah, they're heavy.
still pretty heavy.
Kind of regret selling mine. I've always regretted that.
But tell you what here, and there's not many. If you're building an off-road rig, there's not many driver drop options for a.
No, that's the biggest problem.
So you pretty much are stuck with a Ford 205,
that or a flip kit.
a flip kit for a 300.
Yeah,
So
that was something I looked into. That and a clocking kit and all this and that to make it work. And yeah, I traded it. I don't remember if I traded it or sold that one. No, I sold it. I traded to get it, and then I sold it.
and once again, because I know I do this a lot, but I try to remember that we do have newbies to listen to the podcast. Difference between driver drop and passenger drop, your front axle and your 4x4. Your drive shaft comes in either on your driver's side or your passenger side. Now, most modern 4x4s, in fact, pretty much all modern 4x4s from the late 90s to now are driver drop vehicles, which means that your drive shaft goes up the driver's side or, left side of the vehicle if you're in the US and many parts of the world. Otherwise, whatever, right-hand drive vehicles are weird. The left side of the vehicle, and it goes up that way. That's called a driver drop. And so most of your changeover and transfer cases are driver drop. They did not make many gear-to-gear. In fact, the only one I'm aware of off the top of my head is the Ford 205, which was made until the early 80s with the cast iron driver drop, because Ford has pretty much always been driver drop vehicles, where in the early days, Dodge, International, Ford, Jeep were all passenger drop, and they didn't start going over to driver drop until the late 80s. So, and that was kind of your switch over from your gear driven to your changeover and transfer cases. So, like John said, flip kit on a Dana 300, which turns the transfer case upside down, makes it a driver drop transfer case, or there are aftermarket cases to go to that. So, there's lots of pros and cons to both.
Oh, without a doubt.
If you are a hardcore fan of one or the other, and I know that in the 4x4 world, there are some very divisive opinions on chain-driven versus gear-to-gear, go to 4x4 Talk and tell us why. And that's the Facebook group. If you're not already on it, join the Facebook group 4x4 Talk, 4x4 Talk, and tell us why you think one or the other is better.
I like that. See what everybody has to say about it.
Exactly.
We're going to make you all work this week.
Yeah, we are. And, just so that's what we're talking about. And so there's applications for both. And I also want to give a little plug, especially since he's not a sponsor, but a great supporter of the podcast. And that is Stephen Watson of Off-Road Design. If you are looking to rebuild or build a 203 or a 205 or a 203 205 doubler, you need to get a hold of Stephen Watson of Off-Road Design, because they have parts for all of that, adapter kits for all of that, and if you're looking to a gear-driven heavy-duty transfer case, they are the people to talk to. Now, nothing wrong with an Atlas or anything like that, but you're going to be significantly cheaper going to an off-road design setup. You can pretty much put together a thick butt off-road design setup for under $2,000, where an Atlas is going to be north of $4,000 by the time you're done. So talk to Stephen Watson. If you heard him on the podcast before, you can hear the passion in his voice, and he's going to treat you right. So
without a doubt,
so just go to them and offroaddesign.com, and they can do some really cool stuff there. But John, do you got any other notes on gear driven or versus chain driven transfer cases or anything like that?
Don't waste your time on an electronically shifted case.
No, garbage.
Anything you do.
Garbage, man. If it's got a knob or buttons on the dashboard, just forget it and just put something in it with a shifter.
Drive it till it dies and then fix it right with a mechanical shift.
Exactly. Yeah, we are not fans of that. We like the floor shifter.
Yeah, for sure.
All hail the floor shifter.
I like that.
I'm telling you, man.
I don't know why that amuses me that way.
No, I'm not a fan. I'm with you. The Excursions are the first vehicles I've ever had with because I'm on my third Excursion, and then I had the Super Duty, and they all had that stupid knob on the dashboard. Not a fan. Not a fan, man. Give me my floor shift transfer case.
Again, I don't like any automated or automatic features like that. I want to tell it what to do. I don't want it telling me what it's doing.
I'm fine with gear to gear. I'm fine with chain driven, but I want a real shifted transfer case. I don't want next thing you know, there's going to be an app on your phone. Speaking of which, not an app on your phone, but when I just told you about how we used the LR3 to pull out the Excursion.
Yeah.
There probably is, but there's nothing on there that tells us 4 low. There's like 6 different ranges, but none of them say 4 low.
Huh?
No.
How does that work?
Cactus mode. Snow mode. And
I don't know if that's so much your transfer case as a whole suspension change there.
rock crawl mode. So I was like, put it in rock crawl mode.
That would be the one that would make sense.
That's
though.
what I'm hoping. I'm like, just put it in rock crawl. Hopefully that's furlough. It did the job, but
Nice.
man, I'm still not a Land Cruiser or Land Rover fan.
So I think this is more of a guy problem, but if you read the manual, it might tell you what they are.
I don't know that we have one for it. Maybe I'll have to Google it, you know?
It's
so
probably there somewhere.
I don't even know what kind of transfer case that thing has in it. Being the British, it probably has like a squirrel that runs in a cage, and there's rubber bands, and
You gotta give him a little more credit than that,
there's
man.
like
Jeez.
there's like 27 volt electronics that are converted to 12 volt negative ground that are then converted to. I'm not a British vehicle fan.
No. I mean, their old rifles are pretty cool, but
yeah.
that's about it.
So
I hope they make great tea.
John. I've had some fun with this, but if our listeners want to talk about more things about transfer cases, where do they need to hear about us?
Well,
Or
listen
talk
to the
about
podcast. I mean, they're kind of already doing that.
All right.
No, I mean, you already kind of hit the high points on that. Our Facebook group, 4x4 Talk. Just a quick couple questions gets you in on that. You can post, ask questions to Keith and myself. I mean, interact
Or the
with
general
everybody else.
public.
Or the general public,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not just, limited to us.
Nope.
As always, a huge thanks to Mr. Andrew, our producer. Without him, none of this would be possible. And he would probably not have nightmares about hearing our voices every night. I'm sorry. I apologize on behalf of both of us. I'm missing something, I know. Here.
Well, if they're interested, I know we didn't talk about it very much in this episode, but if they're interested in hearing about the Museum of Off-Road Adventure, we have the Facebook page, Museum of Off-Road Adventure, and there's also the Facebook group for vintage 4x4 stuff called 4x4 Museum. Feel free to join those as well.
We got Patreon, too.
And the Patreon after show, which we are recording new episodes for. We've been lax for a few episodes, simply
Some
because
more
of
issues with the
scheduling.
website, too, and
Absolutely.
scheduling conflicts we've had with a lot of stuff lately.
How do they find us on Patreon?
Patreon.com/WheelinRadio accesses those $2 a month. Get access to our after show, a lot of extra, additional, and bonus content. That's kind of like 3 double negatives there, isn't it?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, a lot of extra stuff you get to listen to that we don't either necessarily get to in the show or have time for. A little more of a relaxed PG-13 kind of content,
Sure.
I want to phrase it as. We'll go with that. So yeah, those $2 a month get access to that. And I think that's it. So with that, thanks for listening and have a good one, everybody.